I knew who I was. I knew the strengths that I brought. I knew the type of person I needed. I knew the skill set. So I started like with myself, and then I moved to what kind of person do I need? Can I interview for that?
You end up pitting team members against each other at that point, because if Susie can do this in this time, but Ryan over here takes extra long to do it, you're going to have Ryan and Susie going at each other before it's all said and done. And it's really not their fault. It's what you did as a leader that created that situation.
I am targeting leaders in the insurance space. It's just what I know, but I have other clients that are in other industries.
If you do make a mistake, it's okay to admit that you made a mistake and just acknowledge that and say, you know what, I was wrong. You're 100% right. Something I need to work on, and I'll do my best not to do it again.
I have found that it is not impossible, but I haven't found the secret sauce to cold calling.
If you have somebody who actually has leadership ability, but they're channeling negative energy towards that, they're going to drag everybody down. And that's a sign that we can look at and say, this person has a lot of people following them. The solution's not to get rid of them. The solution's to redirect them and train them.
What I'm seeing right now is that a lot of agents, a lot of agencies, they are, we're in a hard market.
I feel like I've always had a very good self-awareness of who I am. That doesn't necessarily mean that translates to everybody sees who I think I am.
We saw a lot of fighting, arguing, just like mistrust between producers and CSRs.
I've got a relationship with somebody who is going to hold me accountable, who is going to call me out if I need to be called out. Your staff doesn't necessarily feel that way.
They're so tired right now. They're so tired of being pounded by customers. They're so tired of getting no's from underwriters. They're so tired of having 200% increases. They have to pick up the phone and call somebody. They're so tired of like running out of markets. They're just tired.
You know, I honestly feel like you're a stronger person if you can admit that you need help. You know, it's the people who aren't open to the feedback, that aren't open to the constructive criticism, that aren't open to being held accountable, that are really the weak people.
And when people invest in leadership, that is investing in communicating, like investing in learning how to communicate. It's learning to invest in how to build relationships, how to find team alignment, how to execute.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Power Producers Shop Talk, where we are refining and redefining the sales game, but not just sales. Got to deal with leadership too, especially if you're an agency principal or a senior producer out there. And that's one of the reasons why I asked our guest today, Ms. Ashley Napier, to come and talk about all of the cool stuff that she's doing. Now, listen, if you're in Killing Commercial, you're going to get to see Ashley live and in person. She's going to join us for Producers in Paradise this year. She's going to have a segment where she talks about maybe some of the things we're going to touch on during the podcast, but she is the sponsor of our opening happy hour this year. So if you're going to be at Rick's Free Bar at 3:00 on June 20th, just know that you will be rubbing elbows with the one and only, and she's going to be there to just enjoy the weekend with us and get to know everybody inside the family. So Ashley, not your first time on the podcast. So happy to have you back. But why don't you take just a couple of seconds and get everybody up to speed on the transition that you've made and what you're doing now versus when we talked the last time.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm really excited to see you all in Key West. I have heard that it's going to be hot and swampy. And so just be prepared. I look fine today. I may look completely different when you see me in Key West.
I will tell you this. And I don't want it to be an inappropriate comment, so I'm going to filter it. But it did come from my wife, and she and some of the other wives talk about what they're packing, and there is a certain female undergarment that they rate the humidity of the day by how much of that they need. So just keep that in mind. If it's a 2 or 3, then it's going to be really, really humid. But it's usually not terrible. But it's not Oklahoma, I can promise you. You're definitely going to be in the swamp to a certain degree.
Amazing. Well, my hair is going to look amazing. I'm going to look like a crazy Chihuahua or Yorkie is probably a better description. Just hair everywhere.
You'll fit in fine.
Thank you so much for having me back on. So, last time we talked, I was in a leadership role. So, I was the chief operating officer of an insurance agency. And I am now doing executive advising for leaders. So, what I noticed, and I noticed this quite a while ago, is that people want to be good leaders. They want to work for good leaders. But they don't know how to be good leaders, and they don't know how to pick good leaders. And so I started on a journey and figured out that, well, I figured out quite a few things. I had a basic assumption that people didn't know themselves. And then I learned that that's true, but also there's a lot more to the story. And I have uncovered that over the last few years. And I am now in a position where I'm sharing it with others, that I'm helping educate what does it mean to be a leader? What does it look like to step in from production into leadership, or from underwriting into leadership, or from anything really into leadership? Because it's a whole new skill that we have to learn.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I always think back, and I say a little bit tongue in cheek, but I don't know that the insurance industry is any different. When I started my adult life, I literally blew out my arm in college, packed my stuff up, moved down to Birmingham, I left where I was living in Morgantown, West Virginia, at like 5 in the morning, and at like 4 in the afternoon made it to Birmingham. And I called my little sister, who was the office cashier at a grocery store, and I said, "Hey, I need a job. Do you have anything at all for me? I know it's tough right now." And she said, "Let me talk to the store manager." So I said, "Sure, if you can come by in the next hour or so, I'll talk to you before I leave as a favor, to my sister." So I put on a suit and a tie, and I walked in, and the guy said, "You do understand you're here to interview for being a stalker?" And I said, "Yes, but I also understand that I should put my best foot forward. So I'm not going to plan on showing up to stock shelves in a suit and a tie, but if I'm going to ask you for a job, I want you to understand that this is important to me." And I say that because I had no experience in the industry whatsoever. And I went in, and my main goal was I wanted to get promoted before I got a 6-month raise. That was my job. And so I wanted to be the best stocker that I could possibly be. What I found was that it was a really quick path to management and leadership if you could stock shelves really fast. Like, that was somehow what got you into leadership. Or if you were a really good produce clerk, that automatically meant you would be a great produce manager. Fast forward, well over 20 years now, 30 years ago at that point, and fast forward, and insurance is no different. If you're a really good producer, I think a lot of times people automatically want to put you into that track of leadership in the firm. And that's just not how it goes. Not everybody that's a great producer translates into a great leader of people. And so, from my perspective, two very different industries, but I don't really see that either one of them does anything to invest in taking that person who, if anything, has proven to be a great employee, great at executing on what they're supposed to do, but not necessarily, ready to go to that next step. Or maybe they're ready, but once they get there, they don't have somebody to shepherd them along the way. And so those are my observations. Two completely different industries, but I feel like there is a huge void in insurance, because I'm not saying that insurance agents are smarter than other people. I would say that the average agent out there has to be pretty sharp to have some level of success. So naturally, you would think that those skills would translate, or at least that person would translate. But if you don't have anybody to guide you, if you don't really know what you're striving for or shooting for, and if you really, to your point, if you don't know where you're at right now, where you're starting, how many people do we have that could be really great industry leaders that we've set up for disaster because we've not supported them?
Oh yeah. So many great points in that we develop these skill sets, and these skill sets get us into management or leadership. And leadership and management are whole other skill sets that we've never even seen. And so we're put to usually what happens is we stop doing the things that we're best at. And then we start doing leadership or management skills, and we don't have the skill sets for it. And we don't have the people to mentor us, to teach us. And then we're lost. And then like we don't lead well, we become accidental, we become less than healthy. And then we don't lead great organizations. We create these cultures that are accidental. They are not where people want to go. And not everyone's like that. Forgive me for like overgeneralizing, because there are some really great leaders out there that do it, but they're taking the time to learn. I mean, it's a whole other skill set that we have to learn.
And I think part of the problem too is, we pigeonhole people based on their productivity or what they get done. And I've seen this happen firsthand, where agencies lose exceptional producers because they try and push them into a role that, number one, they don't want to be in. They just think it's the next natural, progression in their career. And number two, they're not qualified to be in that role. They don't really have any experience. I personally am a little bit of an anomaly because I did run actual operations with total P&L responsibility, total HR responsibility. I was 22 years old, running a $15 million a year business is how I look at it. I didn't know what I was doing. I learned a lot by mistakes. And I mean, even to the point when I was given my first store to run, the retail operations superintendent said, David, we're giving you this store because we don't think it can get screwed up any worse than it already is. So we want you to learn on this one. If that's not a vote of confidence, good grief. But, then they put you in that role. They put you in that role and you kind of have to figure it out. And naturally, I'm curious. I ask a lot of questions. It's probably why I was a good producer, why I still am a good producer. But I think it also made me an effective leader because the only thing I really knew how to do was learn about people, learn about our differences, and learn how to make those work to the advantage of the team. And I'm not saying I figured it out overnight, but the reality is, like, probably some of my best time spent in my role wasn't doing inventory. It wasn't, writing the schedule. It was those mornings when I blocked the first hour of my day to literally walk the perimeter of the store and just talk to people. Hey, how are you doing this morning? Everything. Your hair looks great. All of those little things. And because I took the time to invest in people, I endeared myself to them, and they wanted to work harder for me. They wanted to be on my team. And I say they wanted to work harder for me. That was their perception, but I've never viewed myself as a leader that somebody necessarily works for as much as somebody works with. I'm in the trenches every single day, just like everybody else is. But, I wonder, if I didn't have Florida Risk and I didn't have the experience that I had at a very young age, and then bridge the gap by being a producer, how horrible would my agency be right now? I mean, it would be in shambles because I would have no idea how to relate to people, read people, lead them. I may have some innate characteristics that would help me be successful, but I read a ton of John Maxwell. I read a ton of Ken Blanchard. I read every day on books about books to make me better. I watch masterclass on leadership and things to make me better. And so I've constantly invested in myself because I never feel like I'm going to be good enough. And the reality is I probably won't be, but as long as I'm better tomorrow than I was today, then I'm doing something right.
Yeah. And so you point out something that we say is like, you never graduate from the school of self-awareness. So you will always continue to learn. You will continue to develop, and new things will hit you and new things will uncover, and you'll start leading in different ways. And hopefully what we encourage is for you to get healthy and then start multiplying that out to others.
100%. So you've been in your role for a while now, and you've had the opportunity to work with some. Are you just working strictly in the insurance space, or are you working with leaders across a variety of industries?
I am targeting leaders in the insurance space. It's just what I know, but I have other clients that are in other industries.
So when you go in for an engagement, what does that typically look like? Did they reach out to you, or are you, and I mean, this can just be nosy at this point. Are you having to cold call? Are you having to prospect on your own? Or is it pretty much referral-based business that you're getting at this point?
Yeah. So I have found that it is not impossible, but I haven't found the secret sauce to cold calling. Because whenever you go into places and you're like, well, you could probably use some leadership training. I mean, I obviously wouldn't say that, but definitely those like walls come
That's
up
how it
around.
be perceived. Yeah, people might think that though. Like, who do you think you are? You know?
Yeah. Or did one of
That's
my
funny.
employees call you? Yeah. So a lot of it right now is just referrals. So when I entered the insurance industry, I spent years building a network. And I have reached out to that network and said, hey, I know that you've seen me in a leadership capacity over the years. Now, if you're interested, then let's get together. And I help people in different ways. So the easiest thing that I could say that like one-on-one coaching is one thing that I find that most people really are attracted to, because it's like one-on-one, specialized, what's going on, what's happening, what do we need to work on, let's set some goals, let's go towards it. I am holding up a mirror and I'm saying, what is it like to be on the other side of you? I'm holding up lenses and I'm saying, what are you thinking? Could we think about this in a different way? How can you achieve your goals? And then sometimes like we go through what I would call an intensive. An intensive is like just deep diving into stuff. Let's figure out like how to get you to 100% health. What does it look like for you to be the healthiest type of leader? And then what does it look like for you to maximize that into other people? So like most leaders are about 70% healthy, 80% healthy. And they're like, well, you know, if you need me, just come in. My door's always open. Just come in and I'll help you. But the difference is like, do we truly know ourselves? Do we truly know what it's like to be on the other side of us? And are we being intentional in our leadership and saying, hey, let me figure out what is going on inside of you, what I see in you, and what strengths you have, and what weaknesses you have, and how to get you to reach your goals. So I am helping leaders understand, like, what does that even look like? How do you do that? How do you maximize team performance? Who are you? And then how do other people experience you? And then we do workshops. So the workshops can be with groups of people that are leaders within the industry or leaders that are outside of the industry. And then those workshops tend to like teach you big ideas, leadership principles, and we teach them through visual tools. And it just makes it like more sticky. And then we will do like big trainings. So leaders go to their own classes, and then we'll do like leadership training for the entire organization. So what we see is that cultures become really healthy when we start educating the leaders, start educating the sub leaders, the managers, and then educating and equipping people that are working in the industry. So principals, right? And then managers, and then CSRs and processors and admin, and just like teaching a common leadership language. So like conversations can stop being subjective and they can start being objective. And we can put some really great things into place that teach people, like, how do I start knowing myself better? How do I start advocating for myself? How do I start advocating for the team? What do I need to do? What things are missing? What things do I need to increase in order for me to change this organization? What I'm seeing right now is that a lot of agencies, they are, we're in a hard market. And it's like they're struggling right now. They're struggling to communicate with their people inside the organization. They're struggling to communicate outside the organization. They're tired, right? And like they want some relief, and they need people to, I mean, like, we're exhausted from this hard market. They need people to re-engage. They need them to keep going. And when people invest in leadership, that is investing in communicating, like investing in learning how to communicate. It's learning to invest in how to build relationships, how to find team alignment, how to execute, how to have capacity. It's just like learning how to increase our leadership. That was a really long answer. Sorry. I can see your face going all over. It was a long answer.
Well, the problem is that my mind goes a million miles an hour in a bunch of different directions. So as you're talking, I'm thinking, oh, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? I guess my real question is, if I'm an agency principal, what are the signs that I would be able to outwardly see, even if I'm completely tone deaf, that I might need somebody to come in and engage to help me become a better leader?
Gosh, that could go in so many different ways. So burnout, you're feeling like you don't want to show up. That's one. That's a big one that I'm seeing right now. It's like you're tired when you do. If you've heard back from your people that like you're micromanaging or you are creating entitlement. So I'm hearing that word quite a bit. If you are stalling on goals, it's like you set goals, but you're not really achieving them. What else? If you are,
I would think turnover.
If your people, yeah, thank you. Great. Turnover. That's a big one. If your people are asking for opportunities, but they are not getting them, if there's a culture of fear, if there's a culture of manipulation, if there's a culture of entitlement or mistrust, or if you're just like, I don't even want to show up anymore. I'm just absolutely tired. If there's anxiety, if there is like a lot of anxiety in the atmosphere, if you don't know what your culture is, if you don't know what culture is, help me out. What else? What else are you seeing?
Usually, I think that you've probably got at least one, even if you're a terrible leader, I feel like there's always that one person that's extremely loyal to you, maybe not necessarily genuinely, but just to protect themselves. I've made more like an office mole, and I would think that person would be able to at least give you some level of communication of what the troops are saying. To be honest with you, I prefer, one of the best things that I learned at Target was to get feedback from my team directly. And it's one of the most difficult things to do as a leader. It's also one of the most difficult, and I shouldn't say to start. It's also one of the most difficult things to start as a team member, because you don't know that you can trust the leader to receive that direct feedback and not be punitive in the response. And so for me, and I do this a lot, even when we bring a new client on, I'll do it with their team because I want to assess the leadership commitment to the team and the companies that we're working with to ensure them and provide risk management solutions for. But we just did a simple stop, start, and continue exercise. What do I need to stop? What do I need to start? And what do I need to continue doing? And, at my last job in retail, I had about 275 people who reported to me. So those became increasingly difficult to get everybody in the room at the same time. But it was interesting because when I first started, only the 5 or 6 people there, only 5 or 6 of the most confident, loud, in some cases obnoxious people were willing to voice their opinion. But by the time I was completely done, I had proven over a period of a couple of years that I wasn't going to be punitive, that I was truly going to take the feedback and try and make myself better. But I also proved that I would push back if I didn't agree. I think that there's a little bit of health involved in that, because sometimes some of the feedback you get may not be valid. It may be that it's just a misunderstanding of your viewpoint versus someone else's. But that's really the power of going through an exercise like that, because you actually have the ability to create dialogue and explain yourself further. I'm also a big believer that leadership ability manifests itself in different ways. But I think that the number one way that I identify leadership talent is, who is everybody following? It doesn't matter if you're a good influence or a bad influence. If people are following you, you are leading them. And I've told this story before, but there was a guy that was on the replenishment crew at one of the stores I was at. And when I took the job to go, and I had to go overnight and work midnight shift, this guy was habitually late. But when he got there, The team was happy to see him, excited. And if he was in a good mood and working hard, I watched the team work to that level. And if he wasn't and he was going to drag them down, to watch the team work to that level. So I pulled him into my office and I said, look, man, I said, I just want to have a conversation with you, honestly, openly and honestly. He's like, if you're going to fire me, just go ahead and fire me. It has nothing to do with that. I said, I want to understand a couple of things. I said, because I think you have a lot of talent and I think you have a lot of potential. I just think it's misdirected. And it starts with you not getting here on time. What's the deal? Why can't you get here? You're 15 minutes late almost every night. He goes, I told them when they hired me that I wasn't going to be able to get here until that time. It was clear as day on my application. And ever since I got the job, everybody's been riding me about being late, but I'm not late. He goes, you really want to come into a place and work where you're getting chewed out every night because you're 15 minutes late when you warned them about it? I'm like, okay, so if I made your schedule for you to start 30 minutes after what it is right now, does that correct your problem? And he said, yeah. And I said, so I can count on you not to miss being here at your start time again, and you'll come in with a positive attitude. He goes, that's all I've ever wanted from the beginning. And I said, okay, fine. That's an easy problem to fix. From here on out, even in the schedule we're in, I won't expect you until 11:30 instead of 11 o'clock. And I said, the other thing I want to talk to you about is we have a management training program. I really think that it would be something worth you looking into. He said, oh, that ain't management material. I said, trust me. I work with a lot of people, and these people love and respect you. I said, and I was joking with them. I said, I'm still trying to figure it out why, but you have a lot of people who respect you and follow you. And I said, I really think that you could yourself a good career if you utilized that natural ability and just honed it in a little bit. And so we ended up putting him through management training. He passed the interview process with flying colors. And to this day, this guy is a district manager with them, making $250,000 a year when everybody else wanted to as a $12,000 stockroom or $12 an hour stockroom employee. I mean, I think that's a lesson that we need to be paying attention to in our agencies, because, as agency principals, it's easy to reward a great producer because they're producing. You can see their numbers. They're very tangible. But when you're dealing with the service end of the business, I'm not saying it's this way everywhere, but I feel like the only time you really see the service department get recognized is if there's infighting or something going on. Like honestly, it's why I spent the majority of my time between the deli and the bakery when I was in the grocery business, because that's where all the people couldn't get along. But I feel like in the service end, you don't really see those people lifted up as much, given as much opportunity. And I think that there's a lot of the same dynamic there, where if you have somebody who actually has leadership ability, but they're channeling negative energy towards that, they're going to drag everybody down. And that's a sign that we could look at and say, this person has a lot of people following them. The solution's not to get rid of them. The solution's to redirect them and train them and hone that leadership ability so that they're going after common goals that we can all agree on are important, as opposed to fighting against them.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that reminds me. We saw the same. We saw a lot of fighting, arguing, just like mistrust between producers and CSRs. And the CSRs really didn't have a way to have metrics. Like, they didn't have sales goals. But so we introduced KPIs, and the KPIs allowed us to celebrate. So if they achieved their KPIs, which I set out with them. So we went through and we set the big agency goals, and then we broke them down into smaller goals. And then I worked with the teams to create theirs, what they thought was appropriate for them, that they could achieve the goal. Then we would celebrate when we'd hit it. I mean, it was like, sometimes it was bigger and sometimes it was smaller, but people have to usually want something to work towards. They want something that they can achieve. They want something that they can be proud of, that moves the needle. And
I think it has to be. Go ahead.
I was about to change subjects, and you're about to say something else. So go ahead.
I think it has to be specific, and it has to be broken down so there's some sense of victory along the way, and people will gain more momentum as that happens. If I go in as an agency principal and say, my goal is to increase net profit by 8 points this year over last year, what am I really telling my team? Number one, have I ever communicated to them what net profit was the year before or any prior years? And what am I showing them that is anything that's going to like benefit them or make them feel good about it? In their mind, if I'm just going to increase profit, that means they're perceiving it as I'm putting more money in my own pocket. When the
Yeah.
reality is, if you can show them, we need to increase net profit by 8%, and here are the reasons why we need to do that. Number one, and I can't do this by myself. I'm going to need help from each group that, each segment of the agency. And the way we're going to monitor that is through key performance indicators. And if you hit these, blah, 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 then we're going to celebrate each time that happens, because that means we're getting closer to the common goal for the team. And so, I've always tied, maybe it's a catered lunch, maybe we go to lunch together as a department or whatever, if people hit their individual departmental goals, and then tie the overall goal to a much bigger thing, like taking the entire team on a cruise for a week, a long weekend or something like that. So they get some immediate gratification knowing they're pushing the ball forward and still keeping their eye on the big prize at the end. And I think that that's a place where a lot of us make mistakes, because let's face it, there's a lot of agencies that we could walk into right now that don't even have KPIs defined, period. Like they've never even talked about it. And so that's a whole different conversation when you go in and put KPIs in place, and now you're going to hold people accountable when they really haven't been held accountable. That creates a whole interesting cultural dynamic that you have to navigate.
Oh, it's really true. And what I see more frequently than I would like, and I want to create awareness about this, is that when we start going in and we're like aiming for these KPIs, let's say that we hear this today and we're like, we're going to start some KPIs. What we tend to forget, what I have done, I've done this myself, is I'm going to go in and I'm going to install some KPIs and we're just going to start doing stuff. And I completely forgot how to communicate it. I forgot that relationships matter and that I didn't have team alignment. And so I just went in for execution. And you know what I heard back? You really suck. I heard it. Like, people didn't like me. I was a micromanager, and I didn't even consider the relationships. I didn't consider what it was like to be on the other side of me, to sit at my desk and hear, hey, we were going to change these KPIs, and this is why I think that this is going to be helpful. So my communication was all about metrics. It wasn't about like, how do we drive the team forward? How are we building the organization? Who are you as a person? How do you show up? What do you contribute to the team? How does this all work together? And then go towards execution.
Absolutely. I think KPIs are something that's really easy to establish in our industry, but very difficult to communicate if you don't do it the right way. I think the other thing too is getting your team's buy-in. When I talk to somebody, I don't want to just say this is your KPI. I want to know what are the things that are important to your role? What are the things that we can measure that are going to show us what a great job you're doing? And let them give you some feedback. It doesn't mean you have to take 100% of it, but it'll at least give you an idea of whether or not you're misaligned. You're misaligned with your thought process in that person. And I mean, we're at a point now, I think that the other thing is, and this actually makes this a little bit more complex if you don't have good communication skills, even though it should make it easier, is the amount of data that we can get out of our agencies at this point with companies like Arius Analytics and Neon and Enable and some of these others. They can get right down to the individual CSR to tell you how many minutes and seconds it's taking to endorse a driver or endorse a vehicle or issue a certificate of insurance. We want to measure that. We want to establish a standard and hold people to it, and probably do a really bad job of communicating, because what ends up happening, at least from what I've seen, is you end up pitting team members against each other at that point. Because if Susie can do this in this time, but Ryan over here takes extra long to do it, you're going to have Ryan and Susie going at each other before it's all said and done. And it's really not their fault. It's what you did as a leader that created that situation. So I think that the fact we have data at our fingertips doesn't mean we should just, use it willy-nilly. We need to have a plan around that and a way to communicate it. But I think that helps us make concrete assessments when we need to make the concrete assessments.
Oh, yeah. That made me think about, like, let's say that we've got Susie and I forgot your other name, Susie and Gerald.
Ryan.
And we're comparing.
Yeah, Gerald. Gerald's a winner.
Got Susie and Gerald, and they have the same expectations, and we've got them in the same roles, but they're two completely different people with two different personalities. And we're saying, hey, Gerald, like, we appreciate what you're doing, but we're not seeing the benefit that Susie's bringing because she's quiet, because she doesn't speak up in meetings, but she's the one like holding the team together. She's the one that's like creating cohesive teams. And Gerald is like getting his metrics done, but he could be I just thumbs up. He could be doing things that may not be beneficial in other areas. And so like sometimes we can look at metrics and we can take the lens of people off and we can make judgment calls with that. If we don't communicate, we can make judgment calls that could actually hinder the team. Guilty of that too.
You know, I'm probably guilty of everything, including the next thing I'm getting ready to say. You know, for me, I think leadership starts with how you bring somebody into your organization from the very beginning. I want everything to be smooth and flawless for those people. I want all of their technology to be set up. I want their laptop to be there waiting on them. I want to have a nice welcome gift for them with company branded merchandise and all of that. I want them to have a great first week. At the end of the first week, I want to be able to give them a gift basket with a bottle of champagne and some toasting glasses and maybe a gift card to a restaurant so that they can go out and celebrate a great first week. And I want to set the tone from the very beginning. And I just don't know how many times we actually execute on that collectively as a peer group. I know that's what I want to do, but I can't tell you that I've done that every single time. And I think that really that sets the tone for how people are going to take direction from you, how they're going to respond to you down the road. If you just bring them in and say, go sit with Mildred. She's been here for 40 years. You know, she can show you how we've always done it. Like, that's like the absolute worst case scenario for somebody on their first day. And so I think that would be one challenge I would make to a lot of my peer group is think about how you onboard somebody. How do you bring them in their first day, their first week? What does that look like? Do you have people that they shadow, that they learn from, that are going to be their peers? Do you have them work in different areas of the agency so they get to know other people and can understand pieces and parts? And I mean, I don't know what the right or wrong answer is to that, but I think that there's definitely some merit to the fact that if you bring them in wrong, they're probably not going to stay long.
Oh, yeah. I think that people decide in the first few days, like if they like it or not. Now, I personally haven't had anybody leave like just right after they first started, but I had heard from other people that it was like intentionality is key. Now, I started way back, right? Like I knew who I was. I knew the strengths that I brought. I knew the type of person I needed. I knew the skill set. So I started like with myself. And then I moved to what kind of person do I need? Can I interview for that? And then whenever I hired them, it was like a whole process of, hey, I'm going to figure out your shirt size and we're going to take you out to lunch and we're going to get the whole team together and we're going to interview you on the interview, right? It was like, just have a good time, sit around and laugh and joke. And then we're going to take you out to lunch. And then your first week, you're going to learn these 15 things. And then you're going to learn these 20. And then, I mean, it's just like a whole process of getting people in and making them feel welcome. I do think it sets the tone. They come in and their chair is broken, their desk is, cluttered, and it's got the last person's stuff in it. That doesn't make you feel real great. I mean, like, you can create that culture. That's an accidental culture that you probably would benefit if you were to just be a little bit more intentional and do those nice things for people.
We've talked quite a bit about self-awareness. How did somebody even start down that path? Like you just said it, you knew who you were. I have a pretty good idea of who I am. I feel like I always have. I think it's also been a moving target over time. But I'm usually pretty self-aware. You know, you hear people say I'm my own biggest critic. I wouldn't necessarily say I'm just my own biggest critic. I'm my own biggest fan too in some ways. You know, if I go out and do something really good, I'm gonna pat myself on the back for it and feel good about it. But um, you know, I know where I'm strong. I know where I need help. I go seek help where I need help. I try and get better, you know, and I think if there is something that I've learned over the years in leadership and in parenting, not completely unrelated, um, it's that if you do make a mistake, it's okay to admit that you made a mistake and just acknowledge that and say, you know what, I was wrong. You're 100% right. Something I need to work on, and I'll do my best not to do it again. And you know, as long as you show that you learned from it and you're going to do your best not to do it again, and you're working on things, then you get a lot more credibility, I think, out of the people that you're leading at that point. But I think that there's a lot of times where we're not self-aware enough, or we're not willing to be humble enough to say, you know what, I don't know it all. I'm still imperfect. I still am going to make mistakes, but I'll own the mistakes when I make them. I'm not going to blame anybody else. I'm not going to blame my team. If it's mine, it's mine, and I own it. And I think that's something that we all can continuously work on getting better for. I don't know that anybody's ever going to be perfect in that area, but I also feel like there's a lot of times where I hear my team this, my team that, and I'm thinking, it's kind of a you problem. You might want to look in the mirror. Who's leading your team?
Yeah. Yeah. So I would like to say that I haven't always known who I was. I have an idea. Like, I know that I like potato chips, and I know that like the color of red is fun to wear, and I know that I like cars. Like, there's things that I know, but I think that there was more things hidden about from me that I didn't know. And I spent a lot of time uncovering that. And I mean, like, I studied this, not myself, but like character and personalities and behaviors. I studied it like some people study policy language. I mean, like, I studied it really hard. And so I began to learn through trait instruments. So the one that we teach is called Five Voices, and it is a personality indicator. But I started on DISC, and then I think I went into then I went to Myers-Briggs, and then I went to Enneagram. And I mean, it was just like anything like that. That's a good place to start. And then start figuring out what do I think I know about myself. I thought I was a different personality than what I was. And so I think it's so cool that you know who you are. I sure as heck didn't. I thought I was somebody else. So I had to like ask people for feedback. Is this what it's like to be on the other side of me? And they're like, no, you're more like this. I'm like, okay. So one of the things that I thought is I thought that I was just really dominating. Like, I thought that I would get in people's face and I would tell them what to do. And they're like, I've never experienced you like that. And so I had stories that I had been telling myself that weren't exactly true. Now, I did have tendencies that I became more dominating, and that was usually under stress. So I had to learn that about myself, but I wasn't exactly accurate in my assessment. So I had to start learning. So I had to start researching it. And I am not advocating for somebody to go learn DISC and Myers-Briggs and Enneagram, all those things, right? It takes way too much time. But do pick one of them, and do ask yourself, like, who do I think I am? And then start asking people. Ask people if that's how they experience you. Ask the people that you trust, and then ask your team. Sometimes you'll find things about yourself that are very revealing that you didn't know about yourself. And then get into community, like get into trusting relationships, and get into community that people are like, hey, you're not being the most true, authentic self that you could possibly be. What's going on? Like, have people help you understand whenever, like, create space and trust and accountability, and allow people to meet you and encourage you to become better, but to like start revealing things about you. So there's not like one way to do it. The one that I think is easiest is like, go and learn hire me to help you figure that out. I'm pretty good at that.
There
But
you
if
go.
you don't, then go online and look it up. But start with some trait instruments, move to character. So I think character is like the ability to be in relationship. It is the ability to be separate and have our own identity, to hold negative and positive realities together, and then feel mutual with people. And then it's like the other stuff, like being ethical and honest. So start looking at that and then figuring out like, what is it like to be on the other side of me? What is it like to sit in front of me and be in relationship with me? And then start asking people and then listen, like shut your mouth and listen. Or ask more questions. There are some people that have tendencies to not ask questions and to only listen and not ask for more feedback because it's too painful.
So I think you said something that I want to clarify, and based on what you just said, I feel like I've always had a very good self-awareness of who I am. That doesn't necessarily mean that translates to everybody sees who I think I am, right? I think that's the main disconnect. So, my motives are pure. My moral compass is pretty much always been the same. I'm very much black and white on a lot of stuff, but that can be misinterpreted or interpreted correctly based on how I'm outwardly portraying that, which is why, for me, stop, start, and continue was such a powerful exercise, because then I could at least get in dialogue and somebody could say, well, you're that way, or you're discriminating against me because of this, that, and the other. No, it has absolutely nothing to do with that. Let me tell you why I was thinking that way. I'm going to give you a really good example of this. I had somebody in Killing Commercial call me out on this. And it speaks to the culture we have of people who we really don't have to have a culture for. We're all agency principals, but we are a big family and we learn from each other. And I was having lunch with Dawn Bartley, who is a very strong female personality. And that I said that and emphasized it, not because it's a bad thing. She's a very strong female personality. And she is very much the type of person who will give you direct feedback. So if you ask her a question, you better be ready for the answer, because it may not be what you want to hear, but it's definitely going to be what she perceives and what she thinks. It came down to a situation where we were down to like the last two fishing boats, and it was the second year we had Producers in Paradise, so it wasn't as many boats as we had this last year. We had 10. I think we only had 6 that year, but I divvied everybody up, and we got down, and it was like several women and several men. And I said, ladies, why don't you go on this boat? Guys, you go on this boat. And Dawn's like, well, I want to go with Chad. I'm like, well, that's fine if you'd like to go with them. So I didn't think anything of it, because I knew what I was thinking. She didn't know what I was thinking, and she thought that I was just saying, ladies, you go over here so you're not going to get in the guy's way or whatever else. The reality is that those fishing boats are sport fishing boats. They are not the Love Boat. They are not a luxury cruise liner. If you need to use the facilities, it's a 5-gallon Home Depot bucket. So in my mind, I'm thinking the ladies would be more comfortable if they're on a boat with other women than if they're on the boat with somebody else's husband or other men or whatever, and nature called or whatever. And I said, so I want you to understand, it wasn't a subconscious bias. It wasn't that I was, or even a conscious bias. It was, I truly was doing what I, in my mind, thought would be the best to make the ladies that were there the most comfortable. And I can see your point of view at this point. So probably could have handled it a little differently. But, to that point, thought I was doing the right thing. My mind, I believe, was in the right place, but how I articulated it in the heat of the moment wasn't necessarily received the way I wanted it to be received. Thank God I have a good enough relationship with Dawn that 2 years later, we're sitting having lunch, and she said, one thing that's always bothered me, my gosh, what's airing of grievances at this point? But we had an open dialogue about it, and I'm like, you know what? I owe you an apology. I said, I'm sorry. I never thought about it that way, and they didn't end up splitting up. I said, but I can tell you unequivocally, this is what my thought process was. And she goes, oh, well, that makes sense. You should have just said that. I'm like, yeah, I probably should have, and then we wouldn't have had questions, and you wouldn't have been harboring this for the last couple of years, waiting for the right time to talk to me about it. So, but I do think. I think that happens in little situations every single day. And while I've got a relationship with somebody who is going to hold me accountable, who is going to call me out if I need to be called out. Your staff doesn't necessarily feel that way. They're going to hold resentment, and then they're going to hold a little more and a little more and a little more. And at some point, they're going to get sick of it, and they're either going to blow up or they're just going to quietly leave, and you're going to wonder what happened, and they're never going to tell you.
Or I think the more scary thing is that they disengage and they stay. That's where I'm shook. Like now you're not producing or not like in a production role, but like now you're not doing your job and you stay and then you like quietly like pollute the culture. Those to me are also scary. But what I heard is that
that's probably the worst.
I think so. That's my opinion, but some people may fear other things. But what I heard is that you were for her. She knew that you were for her and you had built a relationship. And so she could bring hard truths. Like there are times when we know that people are for us and we can say hard things to them. But what you did is create an ability to say like, hey, I'm for you. And you know, you can bring hard stuff to me. But she probably knew that since you were for her, that you weren't trying to be malicious and placing her on a boat with all women. You know, you're just like, you just were accidental. And the thing that happens is like, once we know ourselves, then we have to start asking like, what is it like to be in community with me? What is it like to work for me? What is it like to like be underneath me? Because sometimes like, we just don't know how people perceive us. So we have to start asking. You didn't know that before you told her. Now you're probably a little bit more mindful. But until like, so we have to start knowing ourselves and then we have to start asking like, what is it like to be in community with me?
100%. What have we missed? We've been going almost an hour.
I think
what do you want to get out there we haven't talked about?
Probably like the team engagement. So that's where I think about like the fully engaged people, the ones that you see, the disengaged. So there's like engaged, there's disengaged and actively disengaged. And sometimes like those are the ones that we don't see. Those are the like quiet ones that aren't talking in our agency. Those are the ones that I would say like, hey, principals, if you've got people in your organization and the needle isn't moving and you have started to do all the other work, like you know yourself, you know what it's like to be on the other side of you've got communication down, you've got relationships down, you've got alignment down, you're executing right, you've got capacity, but you still have got some people that are just there's something not right. Like take a look at that, because I think that what I am seeing more often than I'd like to is that like quiet quitting. And that looks like disengagement or active. So actively disengaged is like, I am saying how terrible you are to everybody that will listen. Disengaged is like, I'm just not engaged and you don't really know it. And I think that's like the beginning of quiet quitting. And so I would say like, look out for that, because they're so tired right now. They're so tired of being pounded by customers. They're so tired of getting no's from underwriters. They're so tired of having 200% increases. They have to pick up the phone and call somebody. They're so tired of like running out of markets. They're just tired. And so go into relationship with them, move back into relationship, move back into communication, start talking with them, ask them like, what do you need to be supported right now? How can I challenge you? How can I help you? What do you need from us as a team? What do you need from us as an organization? And then if you can fulfill it. If you can't, then tell them, communicate that with them. But I think that it's something that we need to pay attention to, just because of, we're out of COVID. People are tired from that. Now we're in a hard market. And we're just at a time where people it's just what's going on.
Well, and it's also a time where it's not hard to find a job somewhere else if you want to leave where you're at. Like, if you're an experienced producer, experienced account manager, experienced CSR, there are places all over that will gobble you up. And I think the other thing that's really important, and we'll probably end with this, is COVID changed the game completely. People want to be included. People want to be part of a great culture, but people also have learned that they can work remote and they don't have to deal with any of that if it's not exactly what they want. And who I'm fearful for are the agencies that are maybe smaller, maybe in the Midwest, to the not quite West Coast, but like right in America's heartland, that haven't paid attention to culture as much, haven't really, focused on being a great leader in their organization. But all of a sudden, you've got an agency out of New York City or Los Angeles that can go recruit remote help from that part of the country. They can pay those people more money than what they're making right now, and it's still going to be way less than what they would have to pay for that person where they're domiciled. I think that's something agencies really need to be paying attention to, because it's a very, very real problem. And I've heard from several agencies in Missouri, and I don't think Oklahoma where you're at, but right in that general area where they've lost people who are getting paid $20,000, $30,000 a year more, and it's way less money. And they said, but I can't believe that they left. I thought we were. And then you start peeling back and looking at all of the different things, and it's like, maybe we could have done better and they wouldn't have left. Maybe if we would have had that great culture and that sense of community and striving towards a common goal. Because the thing is, the people that are motivated by that are probably not going to be as motivated to work on an island by themselves remotely, even if it is more money. For the people who are motivated by money, it's always going to be the money. But for the people who want to be in a great culture, you have a chance at saving a really good team member if you're doing things the right way.
Yeah. And I would say, like, when you go ask for help, like if you were to ask me for help, no judgment, no shame, right? Like, let's just like roll up our sleeves and figure out where it's going wrong and figure out like what needs to happen. I want people to hear that, like, it's just life. Like, we just are people and we're just trying to figure it out. Sometimes like we just need some help figuring out like what's going wrong and why it's not going the way, like, why are we losing people, and why aren't we hitting our revenue goals, and why aren't we able to increase our commercial line production, and like, why are things going the way that they're going. And no judgment, like, no judgment, no shame.
Well, it's like we had Ro and Don and Kayla from Agency CFO on, and that same exact message. There's a lot of people out there who need that strategic CFO thought process. First step's to reach out. The second is to trust that they've been doing this. You're not the only agency that's had issues that reached out to them. That's the whole reason they have a business. And the same thing holds true with leadership coaching. I honestly feel like you're a stronger person if you can admit that you need help. It's the people who aren't open to the feedback, that aren't open to the constructive criticism, that aren't open to being held accountable, that are really the weak people. The person who says, you know what, I've gotten as far as I can on my own. I really need somebody to help me get the rest of the way. No different than hiring a personal trainer at the gym. There's some things that, you know what you should do, but maybe you need the accountability. Maybe you need a little more structure. Maybe you need some help refining your diet. There's plenty of people that hire professionals to go in and do that. Why would you sell your business short and not do the same for it?
Yeah, good point.
Well, listen, we're coming up on the hour. How do they get a hold of you?
Well, people can visit our website. So Solomon SA, as in strategicadvisors.com. You can email me, napier@solomonsa.com, or they can reach me on LinkedIn. So Ashley Napier on LinkedIn. So I'm the one, well, currently, if you hear this later, it may change, but I'm the one in the purple dress. So Ashley Napier. But if you look at my profile, I have been in the insurance industry. So reach me any of those places. I would be happy to connect. If you know somebody I know, reach out to them and ask if you can get in touch with me. If I'm credible, feel free to do that. We know mutual people.
Yeah, I can promise you, if you're listening to this podcast, I can vouch for Ashley. But she is certainly created quite a career for herself, has a long history in the industry. I, for one, am very happy for where she's at now, because I think that this is something that a lot of people, including myself, need to look at and say, you know what, I'm good. What's it going to take to be great? Or maybe what's it going to take for me to get good and then get to great? But in any event, you have to be aware enough to pick up the phone, reach out and say, you know what, I'm ready. I'm ready for you to help me. Come tell me what I need to do. Let's figure this thing out together. And it's always easier when you have somebody coaching you along the way, because you got to be up, because you know you're meeting somebody at the gym at 5 o'clock. It's a heck of a lot harder to fall back asleep and hit the snooze button and leave that person there waiting for you. So with that being said, thank you very much for spending an hour with me. Thank you for your support of the community and coming down and joining us as Producers in Paradise. I know that I'm excited for you to share and just to get to hang out with everybody. And I know they don't realize it yet, but they're also very excited to hear your message, because it's one that needs to be heard. So thank you again. And make sure you reach out to Ashley in any of the methods that she mentioned, and she will certainly be very responsive, I'm sure.
Awesome. Thanks, David. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
Yes, ma'am. We'll catch you next time. See ya.